Welcome and Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Divrei Torah. Yeah.
Amen.
So we are, of course, in Parsha Truma, and we are looking at the boards that made up the tabernacle, in a sense, the skeleton of the tabernacle. And we're going to take a look at that. There's a lot of Rashi here, as you can see. This is where we got to yesterday, and the parentheses are some editors' additions to Rashi. They're not the original Rashi. So let me go ahead and show you what he's talking about. He's talking about these. These were the boards that were made. And I know why this is there. Actually has something written in there. Let me see if I can do this. You can't see it, but you will in a sec. No, you won't. All right. So we're talking about these here. This is where I have something. So I'm going to get rid of that. Let's see if I can. Oh, I got rid of the wrong thing. Oh, well. Okay, such is life. So the boards were actually standing upright on their length, according to their length. And these little tenons were at the bottom. And this direction is 1.5 cubits, all right? And this is actually 1 cubit this way, and this is 10 cubits from there to there. So 1.5 cubits, if you look, they are broken up. This is actually, they're actually six, you can divide this into 6 pieces, right? This length here, the width of the tenon, then half of that length, and then half this other length, the width of that tenon, and then on the outside there. This is 1/4 of a cubit. So if this is divided, so 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, right? And then 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, and you will get 1.5 cubits. So it's equal. Look at this. This is these sockets, right? These sockets. This was covered with gold, and these were made out of silver. These sockets of silver. And you can see that they are the same width around that would fit over this. And so trying to describe that without having an illustration isn't simple. But that's what's being described right now. And I'm going to try and do my best to translate the Hebrew in such a way. But I thought ahead of time, giving you a visualization of what we're talking about is helpful. So you understand that these would stand upright. I might actually have, let's see if I actually have okay, so there's how these stood upright. Here are the sockets here. Maybe I have a picture of, there we go. That's what it looked like, right? And here are the sockets. And so, of course, from an engineering point of view, the fact that these could slide up and down on the tenons would mean that the tabernacle could sit straight on the ground, which wasn't perfectly flat, right? It was in the desert. And yeah, just sort of the same principle in some ways of integration in mathematics, right? If you think about how they figured out integration and working that out, the little pieces next to each other that start to approximate the curve, the actual curve itself. So let's get back into the text now. And here we are. All right. So I'll go back to here, right? This is verse 17, where it says, Shtei yadot lakeresh ha'echad, right? 2 hands, right? There's 2 tenons for one of the boards, and mishulavot. So there is a translation. I think this was actually in Jastrow, where he talks about with mortise and tenon. On the other hand, mishulavot, you'll see Rashi has it's a hard word to translate, right? But it has to do like shalev with a bet, has something to do with the fact that they fit together right next to one another. Isha el achota, right? One next to the other. Isha, of course, the woman next to her sister. Kain ta'aseh l'chol kashei mishkan. So you shall make for all the boards of the mishkan. Okay, so let's go on here. So shtei yadot l'ker shaychad. Haya choret. So what he did was he made a groove. V'hacharitz chatzi rochev hakeresh, and the groove would actually add up to half the width of the keresh ba'emsa in the middle, right? So let me go there, right? He's talking about this, okay, right? So that's half there. It's actually a third, I believe, if you want to work it out. But regardless, that's we'll keep going, right? Keep going. Wait a second. Make sure it makes sense. Oh, Kerish. Hmm. Milamata be'emsa'o begova hama. Okay, so let's take a look. Hayachoretz milamata. Oh, so I skipped a line. That's the problem. Okay. Right. So here we go. No, here we go. Chayecheretz et hakerish milamata va'emtza. Oh, okay. So he would make a groove in the board, milamata at the bottom, va'emtzao in the middle. Begova ama, and the depth of this was 1 cubit. Let me go back quickly. I think you can visualize this fairly easily. The point is this is the depth he's talking about it, right? So what Rashi's talking about right now is he'd cut a groove right in here, right? And he'd cut the groove down. This would be 1 cubit in length from here to here. Okay. Right, let's see. Let's keep okay. Umeniach revia rochbo mikan, revia rochbo mikan. And so 1/4 of its width would be on one side and a quarter of its width on the other side. Ve'hein hein hayadot, and these indeed were the hands, the tenons. V'charitz chatzi rochev hakerev, keresh, and the groove was half of the width of the kerev ba'emtza in the middle. So I think what he's saying is that he divided it into two, and that we're talking about here, this half and this half, I believe is what he's talking about. Let's keep going on. So here we go. The editor has felt a need to go further into what Rashi is talking about. Ritzono lomar. What he's trying to say is, keresh nikra, the keresh nikra ma shenishar, that the board keresh is what is called. It's referred to as a keresh. What is left over la'achar shecharatz mikan mikan, after he made the groove on one side and the other. Let me go back into here once again and see what he's talking about. So he's saying the term keresh applies to this particular configuration here. It's not simply a straight board, but what the Torah, when the Torah or what Rashi's talking about when he talks about the keresh, is he's talking about this entire piece. Again, this is what I make of it. I'm not absolutely certain, but I'm thinking that's what it seems to mean. V'az nishar rochav ama, and so there is left a width of 1 cubit, right? So let's see what he's saying here. Right. So when he says rochav, so this is 1.5, right? And this is the point. This is 1.5, but this is a quarter and this is a quarter, right? So a quarter and a quarter and a half, and the keresh, remember, was 1.5. So now we are left with one of this, right? Not this distance to this distance, but from this to this, from this to this, and from this to this. Okay. Okay. So I think that is what he's talking about. So this is 1 cubit here. The total of these two pieces is half a cubit. Okay, so let's go on. Let's keep going here. Okay. V'chein piresh Rashi, and so Rashi explains behedya in detail, right? Specifically, the Perek Hazorek in the chapter called Hazorek. I believe that's in Masechet Shabbat. I think it is Tzadik Chet, page, I'm going to guess that he's saying page 98. Shehacharitz, that the groove, be'emtza, right in the middle, rochav chatzi amah, is actually a width of half an amah, which totally makes sense. That we can figure out. This, right, is half a cubit. From there to here is half a cubit. From here to here is half a cubit. That's 1.5 cubits, so you're left with half a cubit right in there. And most of course, Larry, you came into an interesting part because normally we don't go into this kind of, I think it's called menstruation, right? Where you're doing these measurements, right? Okay. V'haya choretz revi'it amah mikol tzad, and he would then make a groove of 1/4, right, of a quarter of an amah mikol tzad on every side. This is the point. This from here to there is a quarter of an amah, from here to here is a quarter of an amah, and on the other side. And you can see very well here, right? In other words, this distance to this distance, this distance to this distance, it's all a quarter of an amah. Okay. Okay. V'chol yad haya rochav revi'it ama, right? And the width of each of the hands was 1/4 of a cubit. V'chein kol svat eden, right? And so the edge of every eden, he's talking about this distance, right? These are the adanim. They're called adanim. These sockets are called adanim in the Hebrew, right? And he says this is a quarter of an amah. Okay. Let's see. Vedok hetev, and this makes total sense, right? Ve'az sarach tlunat. Oh, I see. Okay. Ve'az sarah tlunat harambam, and this. He's saying that the argument of Nachmanides, who has an objection to what Rashi is saying, he says Sarah, it disappears. This objection on the part of the Ramban disappears. Utemihato misuleket, and his surprise very often when a later commentator will comment on an earlier one who has a great authority, such as somebody like Rashi, they will say to me, Hani, he says, I'm surprised. In other words, that he's surprised that earlier commentator is misunderstanding, at least in his opinion, what's going on. So he's saying now, if we take into account all that Rashi has to say, we're not going to have a problem. V'otan hayadot, and those tenons, right? Machnis ba'adanim, he'd place into the sockets, shahayu chalulim, because they were hollow, the sockets were hollow, v'ha'adanim govhan ama, and those sockets were a height of 1 cubit, v'yoshim ritzufim arba'im, and they sit ritzufim joined closely, 40 of them, ze etzel ze, one right next to the other. And you've seen the picture of it, right? So here's how they sat closely to each other, right? Ritzufim. That's what he's describing here with ritzufim. Let's keep going. Ze etzel ze, v'yadot hakeresh, and the tenons of the boards, hanichnasim b'chalal hadanim, that are placed into that hollow space in the sockets, charutzot mishloshat tzidehem, are this charutzot, again, remember, are grooved on 3 of their sides. Sorry, go ahead. What's
Are
that?
you supposed to be there at 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Did you look at what time it is?
It's
now?
10 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, Larry, if you have to go, I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
So right. So this is, I think when he's talking about the 3 sides.
Barbara, just
Yeah,
one
sure.
question.
Yeah.
You have your next gathering is on Monday,
Sunday, on Sunday, same
and,
time.
and
We
there was one of the dates was an extra date or an extra time in the same day.
No, not as I understand it. I
Okay.
don't believe so. The next
Okay.
time we meet, same time on Sunday, we actually will be doing sorry, hold on a second. Okay. Okay. We'll actually be doing Noah and a different commentator, Torah Tamima. So once a week, we also do Torah Tamima, and we're going through the Torah Keseder. Here, we're doing each Parsha a week. So next week will be Tetzaveh.
Good, good. Nice to meet all of you, Lauren, and you.
Yeah, Harlan.
Harlan. Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
it's
his
his
daughter's name on the
daughter's. Yeah,
computer.
it's his daughter's computer. That's why.
Okay.
Yes, and Michael, great, you could meet, and David, great.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, great, Larry. So hopefully we'll see you if it works for you.
Good.
Okay. All right. Let me go back into the share. Okay. You can see how important the illustrations are in understanding what's going on. Otherwise, it's almost next to impossible. Okay. Let's go on here. Okay. Right. Rochav hacharitz, the width of the groove, ka'ovi svat ha'aden, is like the thickness of the sides of the aden. Here's what he's talking about. Let's go here. He's saying this area, this rochav, right? The width is, or he's talking about this, right? He's saying this is the equivalent to this. That's what he's saying here. Okay, let me go back in. Find the place. Sorry. Okay. Sheyichaseh hakeresh, so that it would et kol rosh ha'aden, so that the board would cover all the top of the socket. Okay. So let me just put this here so I can find this easily. And again, what's he talking about? He's saying exactly this. He says this, right? This part of it would cover the top of this, right? So he's talking about this little area or this little space here. That's what he's talking about. Okay. She'im lochen, because if there were not the case, nimtza revach ben keresh la keresh, because if it wasn't identical, there'd now be a space between one board and another board. Again, just to clarify, if this wasn't exact, if this measurement weren't exact, and they had to put these things together, now this would be pushing against another one. This side, if this wasn't equivalent, would be pushing against this, and these would not be close together anymore. So they had to make sure that was the case. Okay. Right. Ke'ovi svat shnei hadanim. It would be according to the width of the edge of the two sockets. Sheyafsiku beinehem, because it would cause a you know, a separation between the two boards. Vezehu she'nemar, and this is stated elsewhere, where it says ve'yu to'amim milmata. They should be to'amim, I mean matching, I believe is how I'm going to translate that, on the bottom. Sheyacharotz etzadei hayadot, that he should groove out the sides of the tenons, kedei sheyitchabru hakrashim ze etzel ze, so that the boards would be able to attach one to another. Then he says meshulabot. That's that word right here, right? Meshulavot, which I said Jastra has one interpretation and Rashi appears to have a different interpretation. So let's see here. Find the place. Meshulavot. Asuyot kemin. It looks like shleivot. I'm going to say, I think it's a lamed. Let's see here. Yeah. Yep. Shleivot sulam. They were made like the rungs of a ladder. Muvdalot zemizo. They would be separated from one another. Umishufin rashehen likanes, and they would be planed smooth. The tops of them would be planed smooth. Likanes betoch halal ha'aden, so as to enter into the hollow space of the socket. Again, he's talking about this would be planed very smooth so that it could go into the whole that area, that empty area of the socket. Keshleva hanichneset b'nekev amudei hasulam. Just like the steps, right, that are put into a hole on the posts of a ladder, right? So how they actually made a ladder, so that the posts on either side would hold the steps, and they'd put the steps into a hole in the posts. Isha el achota, right? One next to the other. Mechuvanot zo keneged zo. So they would be designed, right? Intended, right? Kavana, right? They would be equivalent, you might say, one next to the other. Sheyu charitzehem shavim, that their grooves should be equal. Zo kamidat zo. This one just as the same measurement as the other one. Kedei shelo yushte yadot zo, so that the two hands, the two tenons on the board, zo mushkav letzad panim, zo mushkav letzad chutz, and the other one, so this one lying inside towards the inside of the tabernacle, and this also drawn towards the outside of the tabernacle, but ovi hakeresh, in the width of the board. Again, let me try and explain. What he's saying is that this measurement, these two measurements, had to be precise and exact, because if it wasn't, this would push this, if you weren't exact, this would be sort of moving towards the inside of the tabernacle, and this one would be moving towards the outside. And what he's saying is that sorry about that. Okay, yeah. You wanted it to be smooth all this way. Right? You can see, by the way, a little bit, this is in miniature, and it's so hard to get it precisely. But you wanted to get an even, that this should all be even. This line is what he's talking about. So, okay, let me go back here. Okay. Okay. Go on. I want to make sure I've got this. Right. Okay. The Oviaket Shehu Ama, which was 1 cubit in width, right? The width of or the depth of each keresh was 1 cubit. The Tirgum Shel Yadot, and the Aramaic of these Yadot, these hands, Tzirin, they're described as tzirin, which are hinges. Lefi shedomot letzirei hadelet, because they resemble the hinges of a door, hanichnasim b'chorei hamiftan, which go into the holes in the threshold. So again, I think he's talking about the way these would go into the hole here on the vertical side, which is the way they were done in a hinge of a door. Of course, a door had to be able to open and shut, but again, you had to have them exactly parallel, otherwise that wouldn't work very well. So I'm going to stop here now, and that's what we did for today. So I'm going to stop the share. Any comments? Yes, Michael. Your hand is raised. Yes, sir.
No, I came halfway. What is that structure?
That is the tabernacle that they built in the wilderness.
Why
So,
why are there why do you have several there? It looks like you have a line of them.
a line of what? Tell me what you're referring to.
It looks like you have rows of buildings.
Okay, let me put the share on and we'll take a look and you'll tell me. Okay, so let me get into this. Hold on a second. Okay, let me just share this. Okay, see if this comes in. Here we are. Okay, so it's just okay. So when you say one rows of building, this is the tabernacle, what it looked like. Okay, so it's just one structure. This is just this is just, breaking it down so that you can see it better. And this is the detail of the boards that made up the
Oh,
side.
oh,
Okay?
those are buildings. I thought those were buildings.
No, no,
Rows.
no. No, they're boards. Here we are. See how he's explained. We're going to go into this area of it, these area of things too, by the way the boards. So it was prefabricated because they had to be able to carry this around with them in the desert. So this is what it looked like. Just some various pictures of it.
Also,
Birds.
they had to break it down sometimes. That's
Yes,
showing how.
yes, yes. During their wandering. So right after Mount Sinai, they were commanded to build this, right? Just showing you various pictures of it. And yeah, they had it with them in the desert, and so they would have to be able to, break it down and put it up whenever they encamped. David?
Yeah, so just stepping back, and maybe we've discussed this before, but the fact that the detailed instructions are in here,
Yes,
on how to do this,
yes,
it seems to me that okay, so was it the point that we were really supposed to be able to recreate the tabernacle and recreate these, because they're actually in this, very sacred text. So, or because it just seems that it doesn't make sense that
right,
these directions are there for one purpose use and they're very detailed, right? That just doesn't, it's not consistent with everything else. So so I'm trying to understand why would you go to that detail? Why would God put
good,
this in there
of course.
unless there's some sort of
What
deeper
is,
reasoning? Yeah.
okay.
Anyway.
No, thank you. I'm so glad you asked that. Okay. So not only that, David, but I think that you'll look as we move towards the end of Exodus, that there is going to be, okay, so in the midst of all of this, because we have the instructions, we have the construction of the component parts, oh, sorry, even before that, we have the bringing of the component parts, we have the actual construction of the tabernacle, we have the accounts of the tabernacle, in other words, how much materials, the weights of the materials, the amount of materials that went into all of this. Okay, is it because we're supposed to build it again? No. Ultimately, the temple would replace the tabernacle. So why such detail? I think that part of the reason for the detail is to add a layer of reality to this. That's part of it. That is to say that in giving such detail, we could get a sense that this really happened, that it was something that really happened. Yes, David?
No, I meant to lower my hand. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Another reason. The tabernacle, okay, there's so many levels of meaning here. One, you've heard me mention one of them, but before I go back to that, the idea that that looking at the world and at human behavior within the world, it is in such rebellion against the Creator that the way people live their lives is either in just pure ignorance. I mean, many people don't, but the world is not united in its service to the Creator, in the realization that the very purpose of life itself is to be able to devote your life in various ways and find significance in doing, what you were gifted to give, but also in service of the divine creator. And the tabernacle represents that. And it also represents the idea that despite all the perversion of the world, nevertheless, there is a divine presence. And that divine presence can counteract all the perversion that goes on in the world. You know, I'm thinking of a current situation, and because this is being recorded, I will not mention names, but there is a person who is fabulously wealthy. And if that person were to realize that that fabulous wealth is there to put that person in a position to do so many good things in this world, to use the power and the resources to do something that would really affect humanity in a possible way. The social problems that we have in the world aren't simple. It isn't just a matter of throwing money at them, but part of that money were to be used to research ways in which people can be seriously assisted and to have those kinds of resources instead of the way it's being spent right now, as best as I can tell. And that wealth is something not necessarily for personal gain or power, but to put a person in a position to be so constructive in this world. And you know that I feel that the model of the tabernacle is actually supposed to be a metaphor for each one of us. That each one of us, in living life that way, are capable of bringing a divine presence into this world. And if you look at our prayers, you see they are so filled with this hope and this vision of a world that is united in service to God and in bringing a place to make this world a heaven, that we can bring heaven down into this world.
So does that mean that, or not does that mean, but it sounds like then maybe, the one of the other reasons for all the detail is to remind us, how complex it is to build ourselves, right? Because if the tabernacle represents, a person, then basically, we now have this level of detail, which isn't, by far, it's a simplification, but still it's what it really takes to build a person. And it's a reminder that, over the centuries or millennia,
Yes, yes,
that's what it really is, right? So is that is
yes.
yeah.
I love that interpretation. I would add one more piece, and that is when you love something, you want to break it down and understand every single detail of it. It is typical that when you're in love with something, right, you want to know it in a very deep kind of way. And this tabernacle, in the sense that it represented God actually being present in this world, was something that the Israelites and the Jewish people were in love with. Okay. Not so much for its material beauty, but more for the fact that it represented a divine presence, and the fact that the story of the golden calf, which is the antithesis of what we're dealing with here, happens right in the middle of the narrative that describes the building of the construction of the tabernacle. And that, in a sense, what it's saying is, despite this incredible rebellion on the part of the Israelites, God still wanted a tabernacle to be
Hmm.
built. And that also is in some ways gives us some measurement of the divine love, of just how much God loves this world and the humanity. And to know that we are deeply, deeply loved by our Creator. Yeah, Harlan?
I got a silly question. It's not pertinent, but where did these people get the acacia wood? And
Yeah.
why just the occasion tree when you have palm trees and other trees? Where did they get the wood if they're in the
So,
desert?
so, Harlan, you may not have been present, but we read how Jacob, the patriarch Jacob, anticipated this and actually planted acacia trees in Egypt. So
Oh,
they brought all this material with them from Egypt when they left Egypt.
okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
of course. Okay. So this is it for today. And let me stop recording.
We'll see you Sunday.